Now let's bring in Congressman Adam Schiff of California, the incoming chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Thanks for joining us this morning. And I want to ask you about those fires as well, some very near your district. You saw the president there yesterday. Are you satisfied with his response?
Well, listen, I'm glad that he's there. I'm glad that he is offering federal funds. That's what he should do. That's what a president is expected to do. Of course, I think all Californians were upset with the statements he made early in the week when people were facing utter devastation. But we need to focus on putting these fires out. We need to protect ourselves because all too often when the fires are out and rains are coming, then mudslides follow and other tragedy follows. So we need to get through this period, and our hearts are going out to those affected, and we're so grateful for the responders out there.
The president has criticized California's forest management. I think that's one of the things you were talking about there as a reason for the fires. And yesterday, saying officials need to look to Finland as an example. Listen to what he said from the side of the fire.
You got to take care of the floors, you know, the floors of the forests, very important. You look at other countries where they do it differently, and it's a whole different story. I was with the president of Finland, and he said, we have a much different, we're a forest nation. He called it a forest nation. And they spend a lot of time on raking and cleaning and doing things, and they don't have any problem.
Does that make sense to you? What do you think of that answer?
It doesn't make much sense to me. The reality is that no single fire has the same cause. Every fire is going to be different. The fire in Malibu is different than the Camp Fire. Forest management wasn't going to solve the problem in Malibu. The reality is we're always going to have wildfires in California. With climate change, they're going to be worse, and we need to take steps to reduce their frequency, reduce their severity. And yes, forest management is one piece of it, but there are lots of other pieces, and I think the president needs to listen to the experts because clearly he isn't one of them.
Well, thanks for that. I want to turn to Khashoggi. Assassinated. We heard about the Washington Post report with the CIA concluding with high confidence that the Saudi crown prince ordered the killing. You were supposed to receive a briefing on the case this week. What can you tell us about it?
Well, I can't discuss the briefing, but I can tell you, at least in my opinion, and given what we know of how the Saudi government operates and the crown prince's central role in that, it's very difficult for me to conceive of a murder of a prominent journalist and critic being carried out without the crown prince's knowledge. And it is certainly testing the proposition that the enemy of our enemy is our friend. Iran is an enemy. Saudi Arabia is important in pushing back against Iran. That doesn't make Saudi Arabia a friend. Our friends don't murder journalists. And I think...
But it does not sound like, from what I've seen, that there is a smoking gun there. So how do you convince a president to, just hours after this report was out with the CIA, said, wait, we're not finished with this, and said he'd do something Tuesday? What do you expect on Tuesday, and the issue of the smoking gun?
Well, I would say this, the president needs to listen to what our intelligence community has to say, what our best professionals' assessment is, and it's vitally important that this administration not allow itself to become part of any Saudi cover-up, generally any cover-up of the crown prince's involvement. The Saudis have already undermined their position in the world, undermined their standing, and the administration needs to make sure it doesn't undermine its own standing. And we certainly shouldn't be engaged in any discussion about bartering the life of another U.S. resident, Fethullah Gulen, this Turkish cleric that the Turks want to get back. We shouldn't be bartering Mr. Gulen and talking about sending him to Turkey to facilitate a cover-up for the Saudis.
But let me stop you there. You have said previously that this should be a relationship-altering event with Saudi Arabia. But listen to what President Trump said.
They give us a lot of jobs. They give us a lot of business, a lot of economic development. They have been a truly spectacular ally in terms of jobs and economic development. And I also take that, you know, I'm president. I have to take a lot of things into consideration.
Does the president have to factor that into his decision-making here?
You know, of all of the reasons to maintain a relationship with Saudi Arabia, I think the number of jobs we derive from Saudi Arabia is at the bottom of the list. Look, Saudi Arabia is an important regional player. They're important in terms of pushing back against Iran's malevolence. They have a role to play in the Middle East peace process. They obviously have a role in Syria as well. And we need to figure out how to manage that. But I think what this means more than anything else is this really needs to alter our relationship. On its own right, we should be bringing an end to the war in Yemen. But we should also recognize that we do not share the same values with Saudi Arabia.
What's the danger to the U.S. if the relationship is dramatically altered with Saudi?
Well, the danger to the U.S. is if we act too precipitously and the House of Saud should fall, that would be completely destabilizing of the region, and we don't know what would follow. So there are certainly risks here, and we need to figure out how to manage those risks. But first and foremost, we need to bring an end to the conflict in Yemen, but also we need to stop placing so much reliance on Saudi Arabia, and in particular on the person of the Crown Prince. Any regime that would be involved in murdering a journalist this way, we should not be walking hand in hand with.
And I want to turn to the Mueller investigation. We heard a lot about that this week, and possibly there's some sort of decision coming. He appointed Acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker. The Justice Department this week defended the move, arguing it's legal under what they call the Vacancies Reform Act, and noted that Presidents Obama and George Bush both appointed non-Senate confirmed officials to a cabinet office. Will Democrats still challenge that appointment, and are you concerned about him overseeing the Mueller investigation?
Yes and yes. I think the appointment is unconstitutional. He's clearly a principal officer, and the fact that he is a temporary principal officer doesn't mean that that is any less subject to Senate confirmation. Constitutionally, it has to be subject to confirmation. I think they lose that case when it goes to the Supreme Court. But it's also in conflict with a more specific statute, and that is there is a succession statute for the Justice Department, which makes the Justice Department different than other agencies, which distinguishes it from these other cases that justice is relying on. When you have a specific statute that says this is the succession plan, and doesn't say you can also use the Vacancies Act to avoid the succession plan, you go with a specific statute. So it's a flawed appointment, but the biggest flaw from my point of view is that he was chosen for the purpose of interfering with the Mueller investigation. He auditioned for the part by going on TV and saying he could hobble the investigation. And ethically, he should have absolutely nothing to do with the investigation. So
what will Democrats do about it?
We will expose any involvement he has in it. He needs to know that if he takes any action to curb what Mr. Mueller does, we're going to find out about it. We're going to expose it. And I would certainly call on my colleagues right now to avoid the constitutional crisis. Take action now. Speak out against this appointment. You can imagine that if a Democratic president whose administration was effectively under investigation appointed someone as Attorney General who had expressed hostility to that investigation, talked about crippling it, the hue and cry. And they would be right. And we are right to raise this. This is an attack on the rule of law. And the question for my GOP colleagues is, will they have the same devotion to rule of law and institution that their predecessors during Watergate had? Because that's what's called for right now.
Okay, thanks very much, Congressman.